What's up, everybody? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the news that the Rockets are looking to trade John Wall. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials up there as well, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the news here from Shams. He tweeted, sources, John Wall and Houston Rockets meet and mutually agree to work together on finding a new home for the five-time All-Star guard. Plan is for Wall to be present at training camp, but not play in Rockets games this season. The important thing there is the phrasing in the beginning is there's just a lot of caveats to it. They met and it was mutual and they're working together to find a new home, but they're not being specific about, oh, is it a trade? Is it a buyout? What exactly is the situation? A couple of interesting points from the roster, then we'll get to what Wall looked like last year, what the trade possibilities are for him. So essentially the plan here is the Rockets think they can get some value out of John Wall. They don't want him to get hurt by playing in actual games, so he'll show up to training camp. And in the article, it mentions that in their meeting, they essentially said, we want to prioritize your health, you being John Wall, because of the Achilles rupture that he suffered 2 years ago. He's now 31 years old, and obviously it does them no good if he gets hurt, and then they can't trade him. Interestingly, the article mentions that there are currently no plans to buy out John Wall, who is owed $44 million this year and $47 next year, which in my opinion makes it really, really difficult to potentially move on from him, because I don't know how realistic a trade is, but they are saying as of right now that they are not planning on buying him out. So quickly, let's look at John Wall last season. He put up career lows in, this is according to Cleaning the Glass, points per shot attempt, as well as effective field goal percentage. He also put up career lows in field goal percentage, a career high in three-point volume, despite shooting 31% from three on a little bit over 6 attempts per game. He also only played in 40 games, and he did not play at all, as I mentioned, in the 1920 season as a result of an Achilles tear. So yeah, not great production from John Wall, especially when you're looking to trade the guy. It's going to be difficult, in my opinion, to get any kind of significant value in exchange for him, although it does kind of make sense for the Rockets to try and move on from him. He is a five-time All-Star. He did just turn 31, which typically for point guards is where things start to go down, but it's not like he's 37 years old. He's got a bigger body, so he can maybe be like a more positive version of Eric Bledsoe, potentially, and you could look at the Clippers as a possible trade option there as we get to that a little bit later on down the road. And even with some of the positives you could maybe see with John Wall when it comes to the injury history and the contract, it certainly would be a huge leap for the team that is trading for him. Now, keep in mind, last offseason, Wall was traded with a first-round pick in exchange for Russell Westbrook, and Westbrook was recently traded for a late first-round pick and Kyle Kuzma, essentially, in that trade. So if you follow that trend, there's not really a scenario here in which John Wall is worth a lot in a trade if you're just going down that line as relates to the Russell Westbrook trade. Not to mention, again, the thing that I think is most prohibitive, not necessarily who John Wall is a player, his performance last year, the injury issue stuff, his inability to space the floor, which we'll talk about later. The biggest obstacle, I think, to any possible move is certainly his contract. He's the fourth highest paid player in the league this upcoming season. He's making the same amount of money as James Harden. That's a crazy, crazy contract for him. Obviously, it happened when he signed the Supermax after making third-team All-NBA a handful of years ago, and ever since then, it's just been kind of downhill for him. Makes 44 this year, as I mentioned, 47 on a player option next year. And again, interestingly, there are no discussions for a buyout. If John Wall was making $15 million a year, it would be much, much easier to try and find him a home, because it's not like he's a disaster of a player. He still can do positive things for you. But 44 and 47 million, fourth highest paid player in the league this year, that is going to make it very, very difficult. Which again is why I think it's odd that there have been no buyout discussions to this point. And there are essentially two ways that this goes with recent buyout discussion history. Teams in the beginning say, yeah, we're not planning on buying him out. The player doesn't want to have a buyout either. That's what happened with Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. And they looked to trade both of those players, and they did not end up with any trade offers of any significance, and they end up buying out those players anyway once they realized that they would rather go somewhere else, like Brooklyn or LA in these two situations, rather than waste away in Detroit or Cleveland for another couple of years. Now, the opposite side of that spectrum is what's happening with Kevin Love right now, where he sees himself as a player that is, worth something in a trade. Cleveland thinks the same thing. The rest of the league does not agree with that estimation, and Kevin Love is not willing to discuss a buyout, does not want to give up any of his money, and so he is just kind of chilling in Cleveland and has been for a couple of seasons, waiting on someone to trade for him or for his contract to run out. If Wall is really adamant about not being bought out by Houston, then he could very much be staring at the Kevin Love thing, where he just doesn't play for 2 years, becomes a free agent, and then goes from there, and certainly would be able to. I don't think his career is close to over or anything. He would be able to find a home, but it would be a weird situation for him to just not play for 2 seasons. And again, the lack of a buyout in the contract makes this very, very difficult. So, of course, now we have to get to what are the trade possibilities for John Wall. And quite frankly, I mean, you guys can leave your suggestions down in the comment section below, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult to find a realistic trade for John Wall, because you just go and look at him, go and look at the teams, go and try and make your own trade. There aren't really a lot of situations that make sense. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the Clippers. They have some of the bigger contracts to make it work. They brought in Bledsoe. They could swap him and some stuff and bring in Wall and not really cause many contract issues for Houston. I don't know what actual assets they would be giving up if that's something that they wanted to make happen, but that certainly is an option. Then you go to the other side of the spectrum, which is what's a young team that could just take on the contract of Wall for some assets if Houston really just wants to dump him. Oklahoma City is, of course, always at the top of that list. They can take on the contract. This is what they do. They take on the Kemba thing. They take on the Al Horford thing. I just don't know if Houston would really be excited about giving stuff up just to dump John Wall. Obviously, it would help them from a contract standpoint, but this is a team that really doesn't have high expectations for their season anyway. So giving up assets just to get rid of the contract maybe wouldn't make the most sense for them. Then you go to things like, maybe it's a Philly Ben Simmons thing. I don't think John Wall is a Daryl Morey kind of guy, nor do I think that is going to be good value at all for Philadelphia to be giving up Ben Simmons in exchange for John Wall, because, of course, Houston would have to add other stuff to that trade package, and then at that point, Philly would have to give up other contracts to make the salaries work. Very, very quickly, it becomes very unrealistic for Philly to bring in someone like John Wall and a Ben Simmons thing. And then you go to look at some of the other big contract guys around the league where it would be relatively easy to make at least the contract portion of things work. You're looking at Kristaps Porzingis, the aforementioned Kevin Love. But again, neither of those situations are really all that conducive to what John Wall still can do well at this point of his career, which is ideally get to the rim and score with the ball in his hands and create in pick and roll. The biggest issue with all this, apart from the contract and some of the statistics I mentioned earlier, is that it either needs to be a young team that just takes on the contract and then buys him out, then he can go wherever he wants, or to a team that sees John Wall as a ceiling raiser. They're buying low on John Wall, thinking that he is going to have a much better season this year, further removed from the Achilles tear injury that he suffered in the 1920 season, or prior to it at least. But if he's not going to be able to space the floor, and he's going to a good team that presumably already has plenty of perimeter creation, or at least one or two guys that you would prioritize as perimeter creators over John Wall, then what's the point of bringing him in unless he's like a bench option that kind of fuels the second unit and goes out there and runs things for you? That doesn't really seem like something that John Wall would be all that excited about. And so the more and more you look at the teams, if it's not the Clippers or maybe Dallas or Oklahoma City, there's just not a lot of options here. And so ultimately what I think this is pointing to is John Wall is either going to have to stay in Houston or he's going to have to get bought out. I don't see a realistic trade scenario coming about here just because of the massive contract that he is owed for this season and next. If he was making 15, 20, 25, maybe even 30 million a year, it would be much, much easier. But for him to have literally one of the highest contract values in the entire league this upcoming season is going to be difficult. So it comes down to if John Wall wants to give up money to leave Houston to go somewhere else, because he's already agreed to not play any games. And if he doesn't, he's going to stick around in Houston. I don't see a realistic trade happening here either way. So ultimately, it's a weird situation. It's a difficult situation. And obviously, by letting this be public knowledge, Houston is letting everyone know, hey, we're not going to buy him out. So if you want John Wall, you can come and trade for him. We're going to make sure that he's healthy. We're going to make sure that you're getting a really good version of John Wall here, and he's not part of our plans for this upcoming season. So hopefully there are teams that will step up and give you some offers. And I understand what they're trying to do by making this report public, but it just does not seem like a situation that is conducive to a trade. All the things that you would say go against creating value for a player in a trade are happening here for John Wall. He can't space the floor. He's not a primary offensive option anymore, at least on a good team. He's over his 30s, or he's well into his 30s, 31, and has a huge contract, and a contract that's over multiple seasons this year and next. So unless there is a Chris Paul type rejuvenation coming here for John Wall, it's unlikely he's going to get moved. It's more likely that he is going to agree to a buyout within the next handful of months, and then he will go somewhere as a buyout player. That could last all the way up until midseason for all I know. But I get it. I understand it. I know Houston's going to try and move him. I don't expect John Wall to actually be traded, though, because I just don't think anybody would really want him. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, be sure to check out the boxes on screen, leave a like rating on the video as well if you enjoyed it, and check out my socials up there at the top of the screen as well. Look forward to seeing what John Wall trades you guys have down in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.